Hello, my name is Pern, and today we're going to be building a trebuchet that can shoot 15 meters. The main material that is going to be used for building the trebuchet is going to be all of this bamboo wood. I chose this because this is going to give the most authentic feeling of the medieval siege weaponry. We also have the tape measure for measuring where we have to cut the bamboo wood, using the saws that we have over here. We also have these wrenches, nuts, and bolts that we will be using to secure our bamboo wood all together. We also have these electric drills as well as drill heads, which we will be using to drill holes in the bamboo wood. This particular drill head will be used for making large holes, which will be used for the rotating axis of the trebuchet. We also have these nails as well as a multitude of hammers, screwdriver, and arguably the most important of all, the rasp, which we will be using to smoothen out the edges of the wood. We also have this vernier, which we will be using to measure the head size of the nuts in order to determine which drill head to use. And those are all the tools that we'll be using to construct the trebuchet. And this is roughly how we're going to build the base frame of our trebuchet. Now, in order to allow the planks to rest on each other correctly, we'll have to carve halfway into the planks so they can rest on top of each other with the flat side that we carved in on top of each other. That way it will be firm and stable. So what I'm doing here is creating markings so that I know where to saw in during when I'm sawing. So this is the result of those markings. After that, we can start the long and painful process of sawing. So as you can see, I'm exerting way more energy right here, using a multitude of different saws as well. And please take note that you will see that I am not actually cutting in like the whole part. I'm only carving out a small piece of the wood, so we'll have a flat surface. And here I am now removing that part that I have just sawed. Now we repeat that process for approximately 2 more times, and then we'll have all the flat surfaces ready to go. After an eternity of sawing, I have managed to finish, and now you can see that they are resting against flat surfaces. Before we nail in all the parts, we'll need to measure and create space for the vertical stand. And this is how the vertical part will be assembled with the base part. So let us begin the process of cutting the base part as well as the vertical part. You will also see me sharpening the vertical part in order to make it very stable. Before we can hammer down the nails, however, we first need to have the hole right there. In order to get the correct drill head size, I will be measuring the nail with the vernier. With the correct size of the nail, we can now begin using the correct drill head size. So what I'm doing here is I'm putting the drill head into the drill. We will now begin the process of drilling and then hammering the nail in to secure the base. Repeating this 4 times, and then we'll have secured all the sides of the base. Now we will tilt the base over so we can drill the holes through both the vertical part and also the base itself. Now unfortunately, I do not have the equipment for holding up the position, so I had to enlist the help from my dad, who graciously helped hold the position of it for me while I drilled the holes through the 2 bamboo planks. And now I will lock the vertical part to the horizontal part by using the nuts, and I will also be using a wrench here, as you can see. After repeating the step for 2 sides, the result will be this. It looks absolutely amazing, as you can see. With that done, we shall now make preparations in order to drill the hole through the vertical stands in order for us to be able to put the pivoting part of the trebuchet. So here you will see me just marking the holes to be drilled in day 2. Also, to ensure the stability of the trebuchet, I will also be sawing off 45-degree angle of this wood and doing the same on the other side as well in order to create these stands. And now that we have this stand, we can now create more 45-degree angled stands, but this time we'll be making it an A stand, as shown in the picture right here. It is now day 2 of the project, and we will start off the day by drilling the hole in order to basically just have a place to put the pivoting part of the trebuchet. Now the middle part was simply taken from bamboo wood with already the perfect size, and as you can see, it works perfectly fine. Now I'm measuring right here in order to mark the middle part, which will be used to hold the part that is called the beam of the trebuchet. And now we're creating a flat surface for two of the bamboo sticks to basically sit on each other firmly. And after drilling 2 holes in each of the bamboo, we can now stick them together by driving a bolt in the middle and then locking it in with a wrench as shown. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to drill holes in order to attach the little thing that will be used to hold the counterweight. And this is the hole where the pouch of the trebuchet will be attached to. Next is the construction of the pouch itself. In the ancient times, the pouch was constructed from leather. However, in this project, I decided that I want to use something that is more smooth. Therefore, I went with magazine paper with duct tape. Here, I also made a second pouch, as you can see. And now, we will begin tying the pouch so we can attach it to the trebuchet. After the pouch, we can now begin on creating our release mechanism. So as you can see, I'm drilling the holes on the bottom as well as on the beam itself. As you will see, I will be using a very simple release mechanism. So here is our trebuchet after all the steps just now. So, as you can see right there, there are 3 main parts. The first part that we're going to be talking about is the chopstick that I just hammered right in there. That chopstick is going to be holding one end of the pouch, which when it flies will hopefully detaches, allowing the pouch to fling the projectile inside of it. And that is going to be holding the other end of the pouch, which hopefully does not detach. And this is going to be part of the release mechanism. A string will be tied from the bottom right there, and then it will be threaded through that hole as you can see. Now, we will insert a nail through that string in order to keep it there. And this is where we will attach the counterweight. As for our counterweight, I will have 15 kilograms put into this box and attached to our release mechanism as you've just seen. Welcome to our almost final trebuchet build. So as you can see right here, we've got our 15 kilograms of counterweight. We also have the pouch and 2 of the most important things, the release mechanism and the thing that the pouch holds onto itself. Now this thing is meant to detach, as you can see. There's also the release mechanism right there that's threaded through the bottom and held up with a nail. So if I pull the nail, then it immediately fires. Before we get into the interesting stuff, allow me to narrate to you the transition of military tactics. Military tactics are one of the many things that changed during the transition from the time of antiquity to the medieval era. With the early Middle Ages having no strong centralized government, there were no large coordinated efficient armies like the Roman legions. The fall of Rome paved way for a transition to a newer set of military tactics that would better suit the newer times. The main power of the Roman army was the infantrymen. As such, many tactics revolved around them. The first notable tactic was the organization of these infantrymen. Vegetus mentioned this in his book, De Re Militari. The first line of defense was the Principes. Vegetus recommended the most experienced and seasoned soldiers be placed in this line. The second line of defense was the Hastati. They were the archers armed with javelin and light spears. Somewhat similar to the second line, the third line, the Ferentari, were light infantry and good javelin men. The men in this line must be disciplined as they will begin the attack on the left and right wings. The fourth line was the Plumbate, consisting of archers and javelin men. The fifth line consisted of carriage ballistas as well as stone slingers or manu ballistari. The sixth line was the Triarii. They were the most reliable soldiers, armed with every type of weapon. They were normally reserves in battle, but should a battle go south, they will step in and intervene. The two front lines of the Roman army were designed to tackle the full brunt of the enemy force, while the third and fourth lines were supposed to be more flexible. They could fall back if being pushed, or could chase down the enemy cavalry. There were also multiple formations for the Roman army: the wedge, the saw, the pincer, and more. As the name suggests, the wedge is where a large number of infantrymen focus on one area, essentially breaking down that specific part of the enemy's lines. To counter this, the pincer is deployed. With the pincer formation, the Roman army will receive the wedge and trap them on both sides. The saw is a formation that creates a temporary line facing the enemy in order to repair a disordered line. The Re Militari also provided 6 types of actions to take during a fight. The first action was the standard regular formation of the army. Vegetus argued that this should only be used when the army fighting has more men. This tactic was meant to envelop the other army. Arguably better, the second action was oblique. Simply explained, this action focuses the cavalry and infantrymen on one side of the enemy's lines and tries to move the attack to their rear as well. The third action is to suddenly rush the enemy on both left and right wings while about 600 meters away. Because the enemy will be forced into fleeing, this can achieve victory very quickly. However, it also proves a grave risk. Doing so will require weakening the middle part of the lines, which means if the enemy is not defeated in the first rush, they could break through the middle part of the lines. The fourth action is similar to the third. The only difference is that archers would be placed before the front lines to ensure the enemies do not breach the middle lines. The fifth action, if used correctly, can almost always guarantee victory despite having fewer men. The tactic starts off with using cavalry and light infantry to focus on the enemy's left wing. The remaining soldiers on the right wing were to spread out like the letter I. Once the cavalry and light infantry start to weaken the enemy left wing, they will try to flee. However, the right wing and the middle part would be unable to assist them due to being busy with the long line of infantrymen. The sixth action involved using terrain to aid the army. If there is a mountain on the left side of the army, the main army can form up with their left wing against the mountain, while the right wing is on the unprotected side. The cavalry will ensure victory against the enemy force in this situation. In truth, the transition from Roman military tactics to medieval one had already happened before the fall of Rome itself. Emperor Constantine, during his reign, had already cut down the amount of Roman legions to about a quarter of their normal size, which was 1,000 legionnaires, from 4,000 to 5,000 during the Augustan period, and created a lot more corps. During this time, the Roman infantry remained the most important unit of all. However, the need for cavalry in order to intercept Germans during their raid is also increasing. The Germans were no longer simply barbarians, instead they now had battle axes, longswords, chainmail, as well as chariots of their own. Furthermore, the use of slaves and barbarians in the legions made them lose their well-known cohesion and self-reliance. The deterioration of the Roman legion and the transition to cavalry can be best seen during the Battle of Adrianople. As Emperor Valens and his men were scouting the Gothic camp they planned to siege, they noticed the lack of Gothic cavalry. Believing that they were out for a raid, Valens' advisors urged him to siege the Gothic camp. As the two forces were engaging, the Gothic cavalry charged into the Roman army's left flank. Seeing as though the situation was hopeless, the Roman cavalry retreated, leaving the infantrymen with no way to retreat, with the infantrymen being pushed together to the point where a soldier could hardly draw his sword or withdraw his hand after he had once stretched it out. They could only stand there waiting to be cut down by the barbarians. This event showed the transition from the importance of infantry to the cavalry instead. Theodosius realized the importance of this and began to recruit more horsemen into the Roman army. In a few years' time, the Roman army consisted of more than 40,000 Gothic soldiers. During this time, the Roman generals actually saw the Gothic soldiers as superior to the normal Roman soldiers. The writing of Vegetus, a Roman tactician, also shows the discontinuing of the Roman heavy infantry. From the foundation of the city till the reign of the Emperor Gratian, the foot wore cuirasses and helmets, but negligence and sloth having by degrees introduced a total relaxation of discipline. The soldiers began to think their armor too heavy as they seldom put it on. In consequence of this, our troops in their engagement with the Goths were often overwhelmed with their showers of arrows, nor was the necessity of obliging the infantry to resume their cuirasses and helmets discovered, notwithstanding such repeated defeats which brought on the destruction of so many great cities. Troops defenseless and exposed to all the weapons of the enemy are more disposed to fly than fight. What can be expected from a foot archer without cuirass or helmet, who cannot hold at once his bow and shield, or from the ensigns whose body are naked, and who cannot at the same time carry a shield and the colors? The foot soldier finds the weight of a cuirass and even a helmet intolerable. This is because he is so seldom exercised and rarely puts them on. It is believed that Vegetius may have been exaggerating the scale of this change. Before the discontinuation of the Roman heavy infantry, the heavy infantry had actually needed the armor in order to protect themselves from the Gothic cavalry. When they decided not to wear their armor, they essentially decided to stop resisting the cavalry with their armor and rain arrows on them instead. The evidence of his exaggeration comes from his own mention of the Roman army formation. The first and second lines, designed to take the full brunt of the enemy, were unlikely to have completely foregone their shields and armor. It is far more likely that the third and fourth line, which were mostly archers, would have foregone their shield and armor. It was also likely that the first and second lines of defense reduced their armoring, albeit on a smaller scale, to prioritize the use of cavalry. After phasing out the heavy infantry, the Romans equipped the infantrymen with bows and arrows instead. Later, the role of light infantry was also taken up by the horsemen as well. The infantrymen were still kept around, albeit only doing minor tasks such as guarding cities and navigating in mountainous terrain. The transition to using cavalry as the main force would be mirrored through many other forces as well. As mentioned at the beginning of this essay, the early Middle Ages lacked any form of centralized government. The lack of any centralized government meant that there were no large armies that could protect the citizens. It gave rise to groups that used raiding as their main source of income. This disorganization eventually led to the construction of small fortifications that could shelter people. The most notable form of these fortifications is the medieval castle. With the change from battling on open fields to sieging small fortifications, tactics shift from one that specialized in infantry to ones that specialized in trying to break down the fortifications. That was the main shift that happened during the Middle Ages. This opens up a wide variety of tactics that do not necessarily involve fighting. Some of these tactics have to do with the construction of the fortifications themselves. Vegetus recommends fortifications should be built with angled walls to be resistant to any rams that the enemy may use. To prevent gates from being burned with fire, there should be a gate in front of the main gate, which was typically called a porticulus. Fortifications should also be built with openings to allow water to be poured onto a gate if it catches fire. Vegetius also stated that it was preferable to build fortifications that are fortified by nature rather than one that is fortified by man. An example of this is building a fortification with its back facing a mountain. Moats are also an essential part of a fortification, as they can help prevent rams or siege towers from reaching the walls in the first place. To prevent an attack utilizing a siege tower, the basis of the wall should be covered with dirt, creating a small slope. This will ensure the structural integrity of the wall, as well as making sure the siege tower cannot be completely mounted. When preparing for a siege, the tactics that will be used would be to gather all the livestock and any other vital resources inside the walls. To ensure that the people inside the fortifications do not run out of water, Vegetius recommends that they dig a well inside of the walls. If the main water source is located outside of the main fortification, then there should also be a small fortification around the water source as well. This allows the water source to be defended during a siege. Infantrymen and cavalry that dominate on the wide battlefield are practically useless against fortifications. This caused the widespread adoption of multiple siege engines. Some of these were tortoises, rams, siege hooks, mobile towers, and multiple types of catapults. The tortoise is a machine that can be used to deal damage to the fortification's walls. It was built using timber and has a beam in the middle of it. If an iron hook is attached to the beam, it can be used to take out stone blocks from the walls and would be called a falx in this case. If instead the head of a beam is simply covered with iron, it can be used to undermine the walls, which would be called a ram. Mobile towers, or siege towers as the name suggests, were tall towers that can be moved around. These towers were as tall as the walls of the fortifications they were sieging, if not taller. Once they were moved close enough to the walls of these towers, they would serve as a way for the soldiers to climb into the city, as these mobile towers are full of ladders inside. However, it also holds many more dangers inside of it. In the lower story, the mobile towers would contain a ram that can damage walls. The middle story would contain bridges that allow the soldiers to climb into the city. The top story would contain archers that would kill anyone on top of the fortification's walls. The citizens of the fortifications would normally defend themselves using various types of catapults. The simple idea of the catapult is that they launch harmful darts or stones against their enemies. There have been many types of catapults: trebuchets, mangonels, scorpions, and the normal catapults. The trebuchet and mangonels can be used to hurl rocks towards the enemy and cause damages to their siege engines, horses, and infantrymen. The scorpions got their name because they inflict death with tiny, thin darts. Warfare tactics changed with the landscape of warfare during the period. During the beginning, warfare tactics first concerned infantrymen and cavalry due to most battles happening in the wilderness. Due to the lack of a central government, people were held up in small fortifications that secured them from any raiders. Because of this, the raiders required the use of siege engines in order to capture any fortifications. Such was the transition of warfare tactics from the time of antiquity to the medieval era. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16. And there it is. So that is our result of the test of our trebuchet. As you could see, it actually went quite far. Whoa. Beautiful, isn't it? Having confirmed that our design works beautifully, what we can now do is make a completely permanent floor. So we'll be using this wood in order to make the permanent floor for our trebuchet. and this will also be where the projectile now gets launched from. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now time to shoot the final ball. Let's go. And that concludes it for our Trebuchet video. Thank you very much for watching, and I just want to say thank you for giving me the opportunity to make this beautiful Trebuchet. It was a long, hard process, and even though it might have not been the best Trebuchet, I am very proud to say that I have created this Trebuchet using my tools that I have without any industrial grade tool or anything like that. I just use what I had. Thank you very much once again for providing me this opportunity, and see you later. Bye.